The assassination of Aurelian in 275 AD should have plunged the Roman Empire back into the darkness it had just escaped. He was the restorer of the world, the man who single-handedly stitched the fractured empire back together after decades of crisis. His legions, his people, even the Senate in Rome adored him. Yet, a handful of terrified officers, deceived by a forged document, struck him down. The aftermath was unexpected. For months, a stunned silence fell across the empire. The army, filled with remorse, asked the Senate to choose a successor. The Senate, wary of the army's power, hesitated. This strange, respectful pause was the calm before a storm, a hurricane of ambition and violence that would tear through the highest office of the Roman world. The man the Senate finally chose was Marcus Claudius Tacitus. A venerable elderly senator, he claimed descent from the famous historian of the same name. He was wealthy, respected, and most importantly, seemed like a safe choice. Reluctantly, he accepted the purple, promising a return to the old ways, a partnership between the emperor and the Senate. It was a noble dream, but a dream nonetheless. The reality of the empire required a general, not a gentleman scholar. Gothic tribes, hearing of Aurelian's death, immediately surged across the Danube and into Asia Minor. Tacitus, despite his age, marched to meet them. He was surprisingly successful, and with his half-brother, the Praetorian prefect Florianus, he drove the invaders back. But the campaign was grueling. The strain proved too much. Just 6 months into his reign, Tacitus was dead. Some say it was fever. Others whisper of assassination by his own troops, tired of his strict discipline or eager for a new leader. With his death, the brief, hopeful dream of a restored republic vanished. Florianus, or Florian, didn't wait for an invitation. As Tacitus's half-brother and second-in-command, he immediately declared himself emperor. He had the loyalty of the armies in the West and the legitimacy of his family connection. For a moment, it looked like a smooth transition. But on the other side of the empire, in the sun-baked plains of Syria, another man had his own plans. This was Marcus Aurelius Probus, the most accomplished general in the Roman army. He was the commander of the East, a seasoned veteran of Aurelian's campaigns, and he had the unshakable loyalty of the powerful Eastern legions. When news of Tacitus's death arrived, his soldiers didn't hesitate. They hailed him as emperor. Now, 2 emperors stood ready for a civil war the empire could not afford. Florian marched east from the Balkans, his army larger than Probus's. But Probus was a master strategist. He avoided a direct confrontation, using the scorching summer heat of Cilicia as his weapon. Florian's European troops, unaccustomed to the brutal climate, began to sicken and lose morale. Probus's men, meanwhile, were on home turf. Seeing their advantage slipping away, Florian's own soldiers turned on him, ending his reign after just 88 days. The path was now clear for Probus. Probus was, in every sense, the true heir to Aurelian. He was a military genius, an indefatigable campaigner, and a stern disciplinarian. His entire 6-year reign was a whirlwind of constant warfare on the frontiers. No sooner had he secured the east than he raced to Gaul, where Germanic tribes, the Franks, and Alemanni had broken through the Rhine frontier and were sacking dozens of cities. Probus didn't just defeat them, he annihilated their armies and pursued them deep into their own territory, a rare and risky move. He rebuilt the Rhine defenses, then immediately pivoted to the Danube, crushing invaders there. He even put down a rebellion by Blemi tribesmen in Egypt, securing the vital grain supply. But Probus wasn't just a warrior. He had a vision for a peaceful, prosperous empire. In a revolutionary move, he put his soldiers to work during peacetime, draining swamps, planting vineyards in Gaul and Pannonia, and building infrastructure. He believed a busy soldier was a loyal soldier. This, however, was a fatal miscalculation. The legionaries saw this manual labor as beneath them. They were conquerors, not farmers. The resentment simmered. In 282, while overseeing drainage projects near his hometown of Sirmium, the discontent boiled over. His troops, furious at being used as common laborers, mutinied and murdered him on the spot. One of the most capable emperors Rome ever had was cut down. not by an enemy in battle, but by the very men he had led to victory time and again. While Probus was campaigning on the Rhine, he had appointed a man named Marcus Aurelius Carus as his praetorian prefect. Carus was an experienced soldier, but upon hearing of Probus's murder, he faced a choice. His soldiers in Raetia immediately proclaimed him emperor. Did he have a hand in Probus's death? The histories are silent, but his swift acceptance of the title is suspicious. To secure his dynasty, he immediately elevated his two sons, Carinus and Numerian, to the rank of Caesar. Carus was an old-school general, cut from the same cloth as Aurelian and Probus. He had one grand ambition: to finally succeed where so many emperors had failed, to conquer Persia. Leaving his elder son Carinus to manage the west, Carus and his younger son Numerian marched east. The Sasanian-Persian Empire was caught in its own succession crisis, and Carus smashed through their defenses with stunning speed. He recaptured Mesopotamia and pushed all the way to their capital, Ctesiphon, which he sacked. It was a monumental victory, a triumph Rome hadn't seen in decades. The title Parthicus Maximus was his. He stood at the pinnacle of his power, ready to push even deeper into enemy territory. And then, in a bizarre and terrifying event, he died. The official story was that he was struck by lightning in his tent during a thunderstorm. A divine omen, his superstitious soldiers believed, warning them to go no further. But historians have always wondered, was it truly a bolt from the heavens or a more earthly betrayal, perhaps orchestrated by his ambitious praetorian prefect, Aper? With Carus's sudden death, the grand Persian expedition fell apart. The army, spooked by what they saw as divine wrath, demanded to return home. Numerian, the younger son, a more scholarly and gentle man than his father, had no choice but to agree. But during the long, slow march back across Anatolia, Numerian fell ill. He was confined to a covered litter, issuing orders through his praetorian prefect, Aper. For weeks, the army marched, their emperor hidden from view. But then, a foul smell began to emanate from the litter. Alarmed soldiers forced it open, only to discover the decomposing body of the young emperor. He had been dead for days. The deception was revealed. Aper had been concealing the death, likely planning to seize power himself once they reached friendly territory. The enraged army commanders convened a tribunal on the spot. They needed a new leader, a strong man to restore order. Their choice fell on the commander of the imperial bodyguard, a tall, imposing Dalmatian officer with a brilliant administrative mind and a ruthless streak. His name was Diocles. Stepping before the assembled legions, he swore an oath to the sun god that he had no part in Numerian's murder. Then, in front of everyone, he pointed his sword at the captured Aper and declared, "This man is the murderer of Numerian." Before Aper could speak a word, Diocles plunged his sword into him, executing him on the spot. With this single, dramatic act of brutal justice, he seized control. He would soon be known to the world as Diocletian. But one obstacle remained. In the west, Carinus, the elder son of Carus, still ruled as Augustus. Unlike his father and brother, Carinus had a reputation for cruelty and excess. The sources paint him as one of the worst emperors, though this may be propaganda written after his defeat. When he heard of Diocletian's proclamation, he gathered his forces and marched east. The two massive Roman armies finally met at the Battle of the Margus River in modern-day Serbia. Carinus's army was more experienced and was on the verge of winning the battle. But at the decisive moment, according to the histories, Carinus was assassinated by one of his own officers, whose wife the emperor had seduced. Whether this is true or a convenient story to legitimize the victor, we'll never know. What we do know is that with Carinus's death, the field was left to Diocletian. The entire Roman world was now his. The bloody, chaotic whirlwind that began with Aurelian's death was over. 6 emperors in less than a decade. But this new emperor, Diocletian, was different. He saw that the system was broken beyond repair. The empire was too large, its enemies too numerous for one man to rule. He would not be another brilliant general cut down by overwork or mutiny. He would fundamentally remake the Roman Empire, creating a system of 4 rulers, the Tetrarchy, and in doing so, he would end the crisis of the 3rd century for good. The age of chaos was over. The age of Diocletian had begun.